Good evening and thank you, Merlin. My name's Andrew McIlwain. I'm the Managing Director of Investigator Resources, and with me I have Jason Murray, who's our Exploration Manager. Investigator Resources primarily has assets based in South Australia, and our primary focus is on our Paris Silver Project. Late last year, we declared to the market the pre-feasibility study results of the work that we've done on Paris to date. We declared, and that was based on an exploration effort that had declared a mineral resource estimate of 53 million ounces of silver. Paris is by far the highest grade silver project in Australia. It sits in a rural environment, quite an arid area, no impediments to development, and it will be conceptually a shallow open pit with a processing facility on site producing a silver doré.
Andrew, thank you very much for the introduction. Andrew, Jason, nice to meet you both, and I'm really looking forward to understanding more about your company and more about the project. So thank you very much for joining me.
Thanks, Merlin. My pleasure.
Andrew, you said that you put out the PFS late last year. Could you just kind of take me back a bit and just kind of explain a little bit more about the exploration history, about how the resources kind of developed over the previous years, and kind of what made you choose to do the PFS at that point? You know, is the envelope of mineralization kind of defined? Is this the resource that's going to be mined, or you know, are you still in the exploration phase? So kind of a bit of back history would be great.
Well, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to squeeze all that into 30 minutes, but let me try. And look, one of the benefits of where we sit with Investigator at the moment is Jason's been involved in the project almost from the initial discovery, a little after the initial discovery drilling in 2011. So Jason and one of our other geologists has been through the evolution of Paris since almost early discovery a decade ago. It was a greenfields discovery, and a credit to the previous team that had tracked that down. It's undercover; there's no exposure, so you know, great geology, great exploration work to unearth or discover Paris. There's been a number of drill programs at Paris, and the initial or the maiden resource was declared in 2013. As viewers and listeners would understand, the vagaries of the silver price over the last decade has been that it hasn't been easy to finance exploration work on a silver project. But when I got involved a couple of years ago, the project was at a point where a lot of the preparatory work had been done. There was a plan to complete the PFS, but the funding wasn't available at that stage.
When did you join?
I got involved. I joined 2019.
Okay, and we spoke in mid-2020. That's right, wasn't it? So kind of as you were doing that financing, you did a kind of a financing mid-2020.
That's right. And what I initially did was looked at what we needed to take the project forward, and we determined that we needed something in the order of sort of $3 or $4 million to complete the pre-feasibility work. So we put the plan together, and look, fortune favours the brave. The silver price started to move in mid-2020 at about the time we had spoken. We went to the market to raise some money. Our major shareholder came in behind, was quite supportive in that placement, and basically cornerstoned that placement. And in August 2020, we raised $8 million. That allowed us to drive forward with the drilling on the Paris resource. And by June 2021, we had put together the third resource update for Paris. And at that stage, declared a resource of 53 million ounces. I'll get a little bit wrong on the tonnage, but at around about an 88 gram resource grade. So by far the highest grade silver project in Australia, undeveloped silver project in Australia. What it also allowed us to do with that funding was start to look at some of the regional opportunities we have. And when I talk about regional opportunities, and Jason can sort of provide a little bit more detail on this, some of the targets we have are within a 5 kilometre radius of Paris, and logically would add significant value to the Paris project if they bore economic silver mineralisation. once the mineral resource estimate was finalised in June, that underpinned the mine planning and evaluation work that financial evaluation work we did. We had also in parallel done some metallurgical test work, because part of the historical challenge of the Paris project was a reasonable component of the resource presented a relatively challenging metallurgical recovery paradigm. So we spent some time and effort in trying to, and fortunately we were able to improve the recoveries of that domain of the resource, and that was to lift.
So, before we get into the metallurgy, can I? There's so much to unpack already in what you've just been talking about. Jason, perhaps could you kind of give me a quick insight into what the geology is at Paris?
Yeah, sure, Merlin. Keeping it fairly basic. The deposit's actually situated pretty much on an unconformable boundary between an older package of sedimentary units that relate to a Hutchison group. The main component of that is a dolomitic basement.
Yep.
And there's a paleo unconformity right above that dolomitic basement, and the majority of the mineralisation sits above that in older Gawler Range volcanics. So just north of Paris, there's a large, the Gawler Craton, which is a significant and voluminous package of felsic volcanics. And this is one of the, situated in one of the older phases. So it's a breccia-hosted deposit.
Yep.
Intensely argillic altered, quite a significant amount of silica that's come through as well. And I think most of the mineralisation has really been focused along. There's a very preferential structural trend through the long axis of the deposit. We can see historic granites that chop through the dolomite as well, and give indication of that, and it's a nice brittle host that's focused fluids through that area. But it's a shallow breccia. It's bounded on either side by some faulted sediments and schists on either side. But the breccia host itself is generally relatively flat lying. Most of the mineralisation is generally around, if I had to put a number on it, about 110 metres thick in the package. So majority of the open pit is sitting down to that sort of level. In its southern end, it's getting more to 140, but it's fairly shallow tabular body.
Do you have a section you could just pull up?
I've probably got a long.
Section.
I've got a bit of a model of the.
It's just I can't get my head around kind of why there. I know you've said that there's kind of structure through it, but there will be structure right across this whole area, I'm sure.
So just, I guess, two sections. I'll go through to a model which is on the next slide that I'll show you. But on the right-hand side, you can just see that this is a sliced longitudinal section through the deposit, just showing how relatively shallow and tabular the mineralisation is. That's about 1,300 metres in length from south to north in that long section.
Is the function of mineralization coming to the surface, is that just kind of an erosional artifact, so that the mineralization was placed preferentially into this kind of breccia along the this uncontrollable contact?
We're pretty close to probably the land surface about the time that things happen. So it's quite shallow. It's a preserved component of the Gawler Range volcanics. There are other areas within the tenement where we don't see this window of older GRV preserved. So it's quite unique in that fashion. And mineralisation in some components, we're getting mineralisation at 10 metres below surface. So we're quite shallow in that respect.
And have you got laterites or transported calcretes or?
Yeah, look, there's about generally between 5 and 8 metres of a collivium clay with a little bit of piezolytic ironstone at the base of it, and a small preserved hard pan sort of silcrete horizon. So there's the weathering component to Paris is actually pretty shallow, and then we're into intense argillic alteration. So it's been quite a challenging and difficult deposit to drill, particularly in the early days, and get an understanding from it. And there was a significant component of diamond core so that we could get a better understanding of just what we were dealing with.
So you say it's difficult because it was argillized. So the rock itself was so altered that you couldn't see what the rock was. Is that what you're basically saying?
Yeah. There's being a breccia, there's a lot of it that's completely distracted. So it's almost more matrix than clast. There are certainly areas where clasts are preserved. We see clasts. The main host is a polymictic breccia. So it's got clasts of preserved bedrock within it, being dolomitic clasts, sediment clasts. We also see clasts of sulfides within it, and hydrothermal silica that's completely replaced textures of the original rock within it.
So is it a hard rock because of the silicification?
No, it's as soft that I've had Andrew up on site and he's left thumbprints in some of the core. So the vast majority of it, from a mining perspective, it's going to be pretty much free dig in a lot of it. So
and it's a lead silver system. So I mean, do you see galena? Is the silver in galena, or
the main silver minerals within the deposit are native silver acanthite. So they form the vast majority of silver mineralisation. From the lead perspective, yes, there's galena, and we do get a bit of coronadite, which is associated with that paleo unconformity. The silver can be on its own within silica, and that probably references some of the metallurgical challenges that we've been working through. But there's also it's intermixed with lead sulfides, zinc sulfides, etc. as well. So it's a fair. Andrew mentioned the kind of domains which were metallurgically challenging and domains which weren't, and it's the component which is so it's the component with the sulfides, which is fine, which leaches well, and then how does it comport with the silica? How does that manifest? Is it occluded? Is it? Yeah, probably the challenge in that component that we're trying to liberate is related to the fineness, I guess, of the silver sulfides themselves. So it's quite fine. We don't see we've had 2 instances where we've ever seen native silver. So we're talking generally 30 microns or less. For a vast percentage of it, and that component that struggling to get that recovery on, it's quite often it's fine silver that's associated with the silica. So it's coming up with methods where we can liberate that silver.
What's the answer? Are you going kind of HPGR or?
There's still quite a bit that's being worked through on that. We've done grind size trials. There's been various other components that have been put into play. So we've had some incremental improvements, but we've got another round of work to try and see if we can unlock a greater percentage moving forward.
And have you got a kind of a rough idea of how much is in these with the sulfides and how much is with the fine with the silica in terms of the contained silver?
Yeah, look, being a breccia, it is really a broad mix. There's the ability to isolate to particularly sulfide clast is quite difficult. So it's whilst it's hosted in sulfides, they can vary. When we do have clasts, in some instances they're at a metre sort of size, but a lot of it is fine disseminations throughout it. So it's difficult from that perspective. What
do you in the PFS? What did you kind of use as your recovery factors?
When you talk about recovery factors, you mean the metallurgical recovery of the mined ore? Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
It varies from 72% in some areas. There's a small oxide zone in the ore body which has very poor recovery. So we it's about 7% of the resource. We actually don't expect that we will treat that because of its poor recovery. But the other material ranges between 72 and 85% recoveries. And we sort of conservatively say that that's about a 75% average recovery. You mentioned before HPGRs. It'll have a relatively conventional front-end crushing grinding facility. Whilst Jason said there's quite a large proportion of the material we expect to be free dig or rip and dig, we're accounting for about 30% of it will require drilling and blasting, and that will be more of the material down towards the dolomitic base of the pit. So we obviously will be set up for the more difficult material to handle, which will be that harder dolomite. But as Jason indicated, some of the rest of the material is quite soft, and in fact, yeah, you can put your finger into the core.
And argillic clay. So you'll have kind of a large proportion of clay material in the plant, so you'll have to kind of manage those physical characteristics of the ore as well, won't you?
Sure, and part of the PFS strategy is that we actually will mine faster than we will process, and that was for two primary reasons. One is that mining at a higher rate means that there's a different equipment fleet would be required, and the productivity and efficiencies of that larger fleet for a higher mining tonnage makes a significant change in our mining cost. So we'll actually have quite a large ROM stockpile, which will allow us to blend and schedule feed to the mill. So we don't. You're right, with that argillic clay material, there will be some handling challenges, but it's not as though we're anticipating having to put in something like a log washer or something at the front end to handle that material. Okay,
good. And sorry, I interrupted you full flow when you were in full flow to kind of jump into the geology, and thank you, Jason. But Andrew, could you give me could you just run through the highlights of the PFS now, just so that I kind of, now that I've got a better understanding of what it is, can we just have a look at kind of what the outputs were for that PFS?
Sure. Well, in fact, some of the headlines were there in the slide that Jason had up. So the resource that we anticipate mining is around about 9 million tonnes that will, at a run of mine grade of 128 grams per tonne, and that produces a little less than 30 million recovered ounces over a 6-year mine life. The project's got a relatively modest capex of about $130 million. And with those numbers, we worked our PFS on two different numbers. One was, and we only ever talk about Australian dollar costs because everything we will be doing is domiciled in Australian dollars. And one of the things we anticipate producing is doré on site that will be refined in Australia. So we won't have concentrate marking and forex challenges of selling offshore. So that's a $130 million capex. The NPV of the project's in excess of $200 million, an IRR, pre-tax IRR of over 50%, 2-year payback.
So what was the IRR?
54%. And probably importantly, just to put in comparison, today's silver price is $33 or a little under $33 Australian. Obviously, with some Chinese supply news coming out over the weekend, the silver prices come off a little bit. We were up at nearly $35 an ounce last week. But our all-in sustaining cost that we determined in the PFS was $17.45 Australian. So quite a substantial margin between that and prevailing price today of $33.
There's a hell of a lot of inflation out there at the moment as well. So I'm seeing lots of numbers which are changing, but obviously one hopes that the margin is maintained with any gain in the silver price.
Look, and that's something that we need to and will take into account as we move through the DFS. The environment in Australia is becoming more challenging for the labour market. We're still seeing quite reasonable steel supply costs, and we were targeting our steel into the process for predominantly the process plant to come out of Vietnam. And obviously one of the key inputs for us is in fact diesel fuel. Now we have made provision to mitigate that. And I point to the screen that sits behind me, Merlin, in that that's the, if I get out of the way, that's the Paris layout, and as Jason said, about 1.3 kilometres from end to end, 800 metres wide. If you've got a very good imagination, you can see the drill lines across that resource. It's a very quite an arid environment in the centre of, or not quite the centre of South Australia. So we'll have a solar, and we're anticipating having a solar power production on site. But as you can appreciate, the sun doesn't shine for 24 hours a day, so we need some diesel backup. So long story is that diesel fuel costs will certainly be a large input and something that we need to be very cognizant of. And look, when we jump forward and try to project what steel and fabrication costs and labour costs are in 2 years' time when we're in production is obviously part of the sensitivity analysis we need to consider.
The resource of 9 million tonnes that you expect is going to be the kind of the mined 9 million tonnes. Jason, is the future work that you're going to be doing on that, is that mostly going to be infill work and geotech work that you're going to be, any future drilling is going to be de-risking that known resource? And what is the potential to expand? What's the exploration potential outside of that 1.3 kilometres by 800 metres?
Yeah, look, it's going to be a bit of a combination, Merlin. So there'll be a component of it that we will need to improve our confidence in. There's components of the resource that are still inferred that we can bring up to at least indicated classification. There are still components, particularly on the southern end and the eastern edge, where there's probably potential that we can still look for additional ounces there. But probably one of the main focuses that we've got is the near environment, exploration environment, and we're sort of talking in that sort of 5 to 8 kilometre range around Paris. We've had a number of prospects that have been looked at historically, and I think it probably gets back to something that Andrew alluded that we have had times when the silver commodity price has come off, and getting funding for exploration has been difficult in periods. The last 2 years in particular, there's been a real focus on expanding our exploration efforts around Paris and looking for additional resources that can add value to this project, and that's been a big focus of myself and the team. As I said, over the last couple of years, we've just finished a approximate 7,000 metre program just recently, which is all on targets proximal Paris. So working up work on those. Some of those areas we've revisited projects that we drilled back in 2014, 2015, and had sort of moved aside as focus shifted in that time. And others are new areas that really we've sort of expanded into once we gained additional native title heritage clearance over those areas. And so there's components of this work that are that haven't had any drilling in the past. So it's kind of a bit of an exciting time from that exploration side of things.
What's in your toolbox? Because if you're involved in the greenfields discovery of this grassroots success, and there's cover What's your what are the ingredients in your cake, in your kind of magic sauce? Do you kind of
it is a challenging environment. A lot of Australia, and particularly South Australia, is dominated by the issues of exploring undercover, and whilst Paris in some ways I think was relatively easy, the soils really gave it away, and having mineralisation quite close to surface worked quite well. There are certainly areas where that technique hasn't been totally foolproof. We've been trying out a number of new techniques. The CSIRO have developed an ultrafine soil methodology that we've rolled out in a number of trials, both within the tenement that hosts Paris, but also a number of other tenements just east that we hold that are a similar ground, similar rocks, and have good potential as well for silver, lead, zinc, and other minerals. So we've been rolling out that. There's quite a bit of magnetic and gravity work that's done.
Does the ultrafine, does it work? I mean, are you pleased with the results you've got from that? It
certainly enhances the signature that we're getting. We've also found that the previous technique that we were using, there were a number of elements that we're finding we're struggling to pick up that sort of signal and that anomalism. So yeah, with the work we've done so far, we're fairly happy with it. The ultimate test is finding a decent drill hit, and here's hoping, fingers crossed, from the SLAB program.
And on the geophysics, presumably if you're kind of in relatively flat-lying environment, what you're looking for is structure, because does mag pop out in structure?
Yeah, look, mag, it's quite interesting out there. It's definitely not a one method solves all. The magnetic signature over Paris, you'd be quite hard pressed to identify Paris over it, but it certainly does pick up a number of structural features and trends. And some of the felsic volcanic dikes related to the GRV that cut through. So we can certainly pick up quite a bit from the magnetics. We also do a fair bit of gravity as well. So that complements the magnetics as well. Interestingly, some of the trials around Paris, we have got some dikes that don't show up on the magnetics and do on the gravity, and vice versa as well. So there's a bit of a mixture, but we use the two of those quite intensively. We've recently done a bit of a trial with some seismic. The Geoscience Australia did a large seismic profile which cuts through a number of our tenements out to the east, and it's actually passes just south of the tenement that hosts Paris. But we funded a program and got them to reprocess, some consultants to reprocess that data, looking at the more shallow component under 2 kilometres, and see if we can pick up some of the structures, the major structures controlling things, and get some ideas. And that's been really worthwhile, actually, both on these tenements to the east, the Morgan's tenements. We've identified some quite different features to what was previously interpreted out in that way. And it's aided our thinking even within the Peterlumbo prospect as well. So I'd like to think we can augment some of our exploration with a little bit of that work as well in the future. And
is it the intersection of the unconformity with the structure that interests you? Can you see the unconformity in the seismic?
Will, can I just maybe just quickly share a screen to?
Yeah, please do.
And I've just got to go back to the right one, just to provide a little bit of context for what Jason's been talking about. Okay, and if I can pick this up. So this is the magnetic image. This is what we refer to as the Peterlumbo tenement area through here, or the tenement package. Paris sits here with this higher density of historical drilling, the black dots. And this shows a couple of programs that we have planned that Jason will probably explain, well, certainly can explain far better than I, the geophysical image you're seeing here. But just to put it in context, you can see the scale here. This is about 10 kilometres, so this tenement package is about 40 kilometres wide. Paris is here, and Jason's been referring to the exploration program that I suppose has really been starved for cash and effort over previous years. But in the last 2 years, we've been focusing on targets here within 5 kilometres of Paris. And the yellow dots are a drill program, which we in fact finished about 2 weeks ago. So from the point of view of news flow, we've got plenty of news flow coming this year, and we'll refer to some other tenements in a minute. But we've been chasing tenements here. We call this Paris North. Ajax, Apollo out here, we think is quite exciting. This is against this Gawler Range volcanic fault here. Gawler Range is volcanics. Just Helen East, Diomedes, and even we've come out here as far away as Ajax right to the east, and we've drilled some holes out here. So we've had a 27-hole much greater, 6,700 metres or nearly 7,000 metres of RC drilling we've just completed here on this tenement. But further to the east, and if I can zoom out a little bit, here's this Peterlumbo tenement. We have some other ground to the north. But out to the east, we've got a package of tenements here. And Jason referred to this seismic line, which is this line that runs east-west through this tenement package. And we've just drilled 3,500 metres out on these tenements, and it's very early stage, but quite exciting. And certainly, again, we've used this ultrafine soil sampling analysis right across the top of this tenement. It's a different image, but you would see that this Gawler Range volcanics runs right across the boundary of these tenements through here. But maybe, Jason, you'd like to fill in some details on that.
Yeah, so that the boundary of the Gawler Range volcanics is referred to as the Uno fault, and this is the Uno province that we're dealing with. So a lot of the targets that we've been looking at with Paris have been quite proximal to that, and looking at where major structures and the image, as you can see, there's a predominance of both northwesterly structures and also northeasterly structures. Where they intersect the Uno fault is a key target for us, not just on the southern side of the Uno fault, where we may have some greater exposure of the shallow Gawler Range volcanics in the Paris kind of setting, but also on the northern side of that Uno fault, and looking at where the Gawler Range volcanics may have been a bit of a physical trap to mineralization that has migrated along these structures and possibly pulled at that boundary. So that's one of the main sort of targets that we've been looking at over the last 12 to 18 months.
Certainly, Paris in this setting is not an orphan. The Paris project sits here. There's a Menini Dam project here owned by Tenement, which has a resource declared. And as you can see, it's a more lead-dominant resource, but certainly 7 or 8 million tonnes at 5% lead and some silver to the east of us. And
the green stars that you put in there, kind of from Bevington in the east across Ajax and the rest, have those all been drilled already this year, and you've got the results to come out on them?
Yeah, these are all targets that were drilled over the last couple of months. So there's actually a few more between Bevington and higher ground out on the right hand side. There's a number of other targets that were done in that program. So there's about 3,000 metres over on that group of tenements to the right, and then another 7,000 at within the Peterlumbo tenement. So that's all news that's getting out. The Menini Dam being dominantly lead zinc. There's also a bit of gold around the place, so that you will see there's another red star south of the Menini Dam, Weednana, which is Alliance, and they've got a gold resource there, hosted in a magnetite skarn. So there's a bit of potential for gold. We've certainly got a couple of targets around the place as well, over in that eastern package in particular.
Great.
We're looking at that as well.
Thank you both very much. Could you drop the lovely, super. I think perhaps in conclusion, Andrew, could you kind of give me can you map out the plan of work for this year? You know, what you're trying to achieve during 2022 and looking into 2023 a bit.
Sure. So in relation to Paris, we're marching forward to start to complete the work needed to declare or complete the DFS, or the definitive feasibility study. That's a sort of 14-month program, which includes geotechnical drilling in the Paris resource. And in fact, the diamond drill rig is turning up at Paris, well, hopefully tomorrow if it stops raining, but certainly this week. And that will be that. And part of the objective there is that we've taken quite a conservative approach to pit wall angles, and we'd like to think with a short life pit, we'll be able to steepen that up and improve the economics of the project. So geotechnical drilling. We're also, and I mentioned before, it's an arid part of the world, so we have to find a sustainable water source for the project. We have a paleo channel identified, and there's been some early work done on sourcing water from that paleo channel, but for the project approvals, we need to do, obviously, and for our benefit, some drawdown tests, but also need to understand how drawing from that paleo channel will affect regional groundwater sources. So there's a hydrological program that we'll undertake. As Jason mentioned, we will go back to further drill within the current resource area of the Paris project, and that's to move some of the material up into an indicated, from indicated to a measured category in geological confidence. And obviously that then allows us to declare a proven reserve. We haven't declared a reserve on the project as yet, but that will be a product of the DFS. We'll also
you're not expecting the overall mineable tonnage to change. You're just going to get greater confidence around that 9 million tonne figure.
Look, I'm an eternal optimist. I'd like to think we pick up some tonnage. So, but that aside, we actually will be doing some additional drilling in the peripheral of the pit. And we do have an area that's been restricted by a native title exclusion zone. It's not a heritage listed, it's not a formally listed area, but it's an area that we've acknowledged might be of significance to the traditional owners. And in fact, we had them out at site last week to discuss what our plans will impact that area and how we might be able to move forward together. So if we're able to get that area cleared, that can also add some additional opportunity to enlarge the pit. Also, some of the more boring stuff behind the scenes will be further metallurgical test work, process plant design, and so on. But one of the key opportunities, and in the numbers that I mentioned before, Merlin, of all of the financial metrics of the PFS, none of it includes recovery of any of the lead component of the resource. We have 100,000 tonnes of lead in that resource, and at the moment, what we wanted to do was declare or be able to present a project in its simplest form that was economic. But as you'd appreciate, we're going to certainly mine and process that material, and for the addition of what we expect to be a relatively simple flotation circuit, we should be able to recover some of the lead. It is a little challenging, the lead recoveries in the past, and to try and produce a saleable concentrate that you could afford to ship anywhere around the world will be a challenge. But we expect we can recover enough lead concentrate that can pay the transport to the Port Pirie smelter, which is only 300 kilometres away from us. So any additional revenue we can glean economically from the lead is going to add to the project value. So it's sort of the key headlines are geotechnical work, hydrological work, resource, and process plant design, metallurgical work and design. A lot of other things happen behind the scenes, obviously, in that process is regulatory approvals, native title approvals, and certainly engaging with the regional stakeholders.
What's your target for the feasibility study? Are you talking kind of Q2 next year?
Probably the second half of calendar 2023, yeah.
Yeah, H2, okay.
Yeah, H2. Importantly, shorter term, we've got 10,000 metres of drilling that's sitting in the laboratory waiting for analysis. The turnaround time in laboratories is stretched out from 4 to 6 weeks to more like 8 to 10 weeks. We do have some of those on a sort of a more expedient turnaround, things that we like the look of. So we'll be getting exploration results back over the next 3 months of both near Paris targets and also those project targets out to the east.
And Jason, have you got hopes up for any strongly argillized breccia, polymitic breccia that you intersected? Is that the stuff that's being fast tracked?
Yeah, well, I'd like to hope that we're there. We're certainly in the drilling. It's a key thing that you've picked out there. If we find argillic alteration, it's a key thing, and it's not everywhere that we've drilled within that tenement area where we do see that. So we've got, and the majority of those prospects, if we've done more work on them, we're seeing that there's evidence of that argillic alteration, and it's showing that we've got hydrothermal, potentially metal-bearing fluids that have passed through. So if we're not seeing argillic alteration, then we've got concerns. So that's the key fundamental that we're looking for.
And do you discuss between the two of you kind of the potential to go back in the second half of this year or the back end of this year with additional drill meters, funding permitting, and results being encouraging?
Planning. Yeah, we're definitely. We'll see what the results of these, and then refining plans. And Andrew will be hearing proposals from me.
Well, the ever optimist explorationist. But I suppose, Merlin, one of the things is we still haven't really tackled all the targets that we have. Obviously, we picked the better ones closer by to start with, but we still have some other opportunities that aren't drill tested. So one of the things we are doing, and you'd appreciate from everything you hear from the industry, is, as mentioned, the laboratories are really under the pump. But the other challenge is getting drill rig capacity as well. And what we've done between 3 or 4 operators in the district is basically we are coordinating our drill schedules to try and keep a drill rig in the district for the year. So it's gone from our 10,000 metre program to one of our neighbours who's got a program. It'll go a little bit further afield to one of the other. I'll talk about this sort of collegiate, group that we're trying to keep the rig in the district, and we'll bring it back probably about the middle of the year. Okay,
good. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much. I've got a much better idea, a much better understanding where you're at and what you're aiming to do.
So, Merlin, just you mentioned, subject to funding, we've got nearly over $7.5 million cash in the bank at the end of last quarter. So that puts us in very good stead to be able to keep our exploration programs running. From where we were 2 years ago when we last spoke, we were at a share price of probably 0.8 of a cent and a market cap of under 10 million. We've subsequently been up to 12 cents post the placement we did in 2020. We're tracking at about 7 cents and a market cap of $85 million. So, the important thing is we've got cash in the bank. We have enough market credibility and capacity to finance this project as we take it forward. But we also have a great exploration portfolio. And look, I haven't even talked about some of the things further afield that we're only just starting to get some soil sampling done on.
Good. Congratulations. Well done.
Thanks very much. and look, certainly credit to the team under Jason's tutelage in South Australia, because one of the challenges during 2020 and last year was, in fact, the COVID restrictions that we had in operating. So, I only fleetingly got to South Australia to annoy the team every now and then, but the guys there did a great job managing what in 2020 was the largest drill program undertaken in South Australia.
Good stuff. Well, thank you very much. And as I said, I've learned a huge amount about your project, and I look forward to seeing how progress continues.
Certainly look forward to keeping you up to date, Merlin. Thanks for your time.
Bye now.
Thanks, Merlin.